Okay, so I'm still without my camera, so you'll just have to tough it out for the time being. We all know that John Huber is suing a whole bunch of people in Kenosha over the death of his son. I have managed to obtain a copy of the actual lawsuit, and we're going to read it and laugh because it's a real hoot. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
And so it begins. United States District Court, Eastern District of Wisconsin, Milwaukee Division. That's right. They misspelled the state in the title of the lawsuit. That's a really nice way to sort of set the tone for the reader as he pours through this document. Now, I find this interesting. It says here, John Huber, in his individual capacity and as personal representative of the estate of Anthony Huber. Where's Karen Bloom? This is over the death of Anthony Huber. John Huber is his father and Karen Bloom is his mother, but she's not a part of this. I kind of find that rather interesting. And who are the defendants? A whole bunch of people, including John Doe police officers. So they're suing people they don't know the names of. I imagine that's probably common. They're going to be covered by qualified immunity, so you're not going to get a dime from them, but okay, let's move on. And so it begins. Now comes plaintiff John Huber in his individual capacity. And I love the drama here, the dramatic opening. And again, I think that this is probably the way they write these, but it just sounds goofy. It sounds like the opening for some TV Western. Now comes plaintiff John Huber, rawhide. Raw. All right. And as personal representative of the estate of Anthony Huber, and a mighty fine estate, I bet it must be, comprising one house and one skateboard. And by the way, the house was given to him by counsel Levy and complains against David G. Beth and a whole bunch of other people. And I find the word complains there kind of odd. It just doesn't sound right. I don't know if it's grammatically incorrect, but it's just kind of strange the way that is phrased. Maybe that's just the way they do it. Now, another question I have is, you have these defendants, but who is it that you're actually suing? I mean, who do you expect to get the money from? For example, you have John Doe police officers in there, but you can't extract money from people you can't even identify. Also, you have a whole bunch of people listed that are going to be covered under qualified immunity. So I don't know if there's some issue there. Again, I think this is standard practice, and so I'm not really complaining. What I really dislike is when it says as follows with a colon, and then it begins the next with a header, which as a technical writer, I find to be abhorrent. Again, probably standard practice, but it's just really bad. This case involves the tragic death of Anthony Huber, a beloved son and community member who was shot and killed while committing an act of remarkable heroism. I could really do without all of the emotional undertones here. And you're going to hear this heroism all the time in this document. I really think that John Huber played a pretty large role in the drafting of this document, in the sense that he just probably demanded over and over again that they mention repeatedly how heroic his son was. On August 25th, 2020, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, Huber was participating in protests against police violence, which were sparked by the police shooting of Jacob Blake 2 days earlier. Mr. Blake was a black man who had been shot in the back 7 times by an officer in the Kenosha Police Department. And the last time I looked, Mr. Blake is still a black man. And Huber was among many who peacefully protested the shooting and Kenosha's pattern of racist and violent behavior by police officers and other officials. And you can see where they're going with this. They're going to label all these people here, the defendants, as racist scumbags and therefore deserving of losing this lawsuit. During the course of the protests, private citizens took up arms and patrolled the streets of Kenosha, acting as law enforcement agents. Well, no, not really. They were acting as private security for the most part. I didn't see them doing any kind of law enforcement. I mean, if you're protecting property from being burgled, that's actually not a police officer's job. A police officer does not do private security. I mean, they will if you pay them, maybe, but it's not in their job description. Many of them had posted racist messages and threatened violence on social media before descending upon Kenosha. They made their plans known to law enforcement officials. These armed individuals were not Kenosha business owners whose property had been damaged, nor were they hired by any of the businesses to come protect their property. And you really don't know that. I mean, the business owners may claim they didn't hire them, but that doesn't mean much because that's a liability issue. And if they did hire them, they're not going to admit it. One of these armed individuals was 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. You all know who he is. He crossed into Wisconsin from Illinois, carrying an assault rifle on the streets of Kenosha in open violation of the law. That has not been determined yet, has it? Unless he's talking about the curfew. But no, I'm sure he's talking about the actual carrying of the rifle. Open carry is legal in Wisconsin. And is this an open violation of the law? No, not necessarily. They're still hashing over this. So I would suggest that we're a little sloppy on this count. Astonishingly, the Kenosha Police Department, Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, and their supervising officials and police officers did not treat Rittenhouse or any of the other armed individuals patrolling the streets as a threat to the safety of themselves or the citizens they were sworn to protect. The question I would have is, were they doing anything threatening to the police or to the citizens? And that's going to be really important. I mean, if they're just walking around with rifles, you have nothing, there's nothing you can do about that. That is legal in Wisconsin, and lump it. Okay, so here's where the bullshit starts. Instead, defendants deputized these armed individuals, conspired with them, and ratified their actions by letting them patrol the streets, armed with deadly weapons to mete out justice as they saw fit. First of all, they did not deputize these armed individuals. No way. That's an absolute fabrication. They're lying here. And in fact, David Beth went on a press conference and said that they did not deputize them and considered the idea of deputizing them ludicrous. These armed individuals were never sworn in as deputies. Also, as far as conspiring with them, where's the evidence of that? You have one statement by one of the armed guards claiming something about the law enforcement pushing the rioters into their area or something like that. We'll talk about that in a moment, but that's about it. Ratified their actions by letting them patrol the streets. Okay, I mean, I can understand them making that kind of claim. And mete out justice as they saw fit. I didn't see any of that. I just saw them protecting property. We'll see if they have the evidence to show that they were meting out justice willy-nilly. In addition, defendants thanked Rittenhouse and other armed individuals, gave them water, and allowed them to openly defy the emergency curfew that was in place. Defendants even made plans to funnel the protesters toward the armed individuals, deal with them. I think that you need a little more proofreading in here. Toward the armed individuals to deal with them. That's probably what they meant. There's no context here. The defendants thanked Rittenhouse for what? Gave them water for what? And allowed them to openly defy the emergency curfew order. Why? Well, we'll go into that in a little bit later. As a result of defendant's actions, Rittenhouse fired his assault rifle indiscriminately a number of times at citizens on the street. Holy cow. This is completely inexcusable. Think about the picture this paints. According to what I'm reading here, Kyle just showed up and just started shooting in all kinds of different directions. This is absurd. Kyle did not fire indiscriminately. And I don't care how you feel about Kyle Rittenhouse. You might think that he was a mad murderer. He was out there to kill people. It was all part of a plot, a plan. But even if you believe that, he didn't fire his assault rifle indiscriminately. He aimed at Anthony Huber and shot him. He aimed at Joseph Rosenbaum and fired. He aimed at Gage Grosskreutz and fired. And also Mr. White Pants. He aimed right at him. This is not indiscriminate. This makes it sound like Kyle was a part of a drive-by. He shot and killed 2 men, seriously injured a third, and narrowly missed a fourth. Okay, I have no problem with that statement. At the time Rittenhouse encountered Anthony Huber, Rittenhouse had already shot at 2 men and killed one of them. Okay, I don't have a beef with anything else in number 8 here. Let's move on. Anthony Huber is a hero. And again, you can only just imagine John Huber looking over the shoulder of these writers saying, make sure you mention that my son is a hero. He's a hero. Mention that as often as you can. It's important. He attempted to disarm Rittenhouse, end the gunfire, stop the bloodshed, and protect his fellow citizens. Really? How do you know that? Did you ask him? Did he tell you this? And I get it. This is a civil suit, so you don't have to have the same standards of proof, but you have no justification for this comment. You don't know why he did it. Tragically, Anthony died when Rittenhouse shot him in the chest as Anthony tried to pull the assault rifle from Rittenhouse's hands. Okay, there's an admittance. Anthony Huber was very much involved in his own death. So here is the crux of the matter. Number 10, the conduct of the Kenosha Police Department, Kenosha County Sheriff's Department, and its supervisors and police officers directly caused Anthony Huber's death. Anthony's father, John Huber, and his mother, Karen Bloom, now seek justice for death of their son. How about for the death of their son? Proofreading, it's a good idea. But what I find interesting here is that it says here, John Huber and Karen Bloom seek justice for the death of their son, but only John Huber is a plaintiff. And maybe those of you who have some legal experience can explain that. I don't understand that at all. Okay, so we can go ahead and skip over the nature of the action and jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is not a question here. And we already went over the party, so we don't care about this. Okay, now we come to the section of the lawsuit called facts. And what are facts? Well, that kind of depends on who you talk to. We're in the realm of law, so it differs from what you would think normally, because most of us would say a fact is something that is demonstrably true. Water is wet. We can demonstrate that. In technical writing, a fact is something that could be proven true or false. So it distinguishes a fact from an opinion. Water is dry. No, water is actually wet. It's not dry, but that statement, water is dry, is still a fact. And I use the term factual type statement to just sort of distinguish it from an opinion. Facts used here, the easiest way I can think of explaining this is those statements for which a jury would be involved in determining truth or falsehood. In other words, again, not opinions. Now, if I have this wrong, let me know. I'm not a lawyer, but that's the best I could do. I mean, if you want to go to Black's Law Dictionary, it says here, a thing done, an action performed, or an incident transpiring, an event or circumstance, an actual occurrence. And the reason why I bring this thing up is a lot of the statements that are in this section called facts are not really facts. We'll see. On August 23rd, 2020, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, KPD officer Rustin Shesky shot Jacob Blake in the back 7 times without justification. Okay, I have a real problem with this statement. First of all, this is not something that the jury is going to determine is true or false anyway. They're not interested in determining whether Rustin Shesky shot Jacob Blake in the back without justification. Also, the state already investigated this incident and came back with a comment that indicated that Rustin Shesky's act was probably in self-defense and that there was no evidence to support any charges on him. Kenosha County took that report and said, we are not going to charge Rustin Shesky because the evidence points towards this being self-defense. So how can you claim in a section called facts that Rustin Shesky shot Jacob Blake in the back 7 times without justification? So we're already beginning this facts section with real problems here. And this is the kind of statement that just makes a judge's eyes open up like, oh, come on. When video of the KPD's shooting of Blake was released, it rightly sparked public outrage. That's not a factual statement. It sparked outrage. Yes, I have no problem with that. Rightly sparked outrage. I have a problem with that. That's an opinion. On Monday, August 24th, 2020, the demonstrations continued. Defendant Beth put in place an 8 p.m. curfew. Again, the curfew was aimed at protesters. What did the curfew actually say? Did it specifically target protesters? My gut feeling is that the curfew targeted pretty much everybody. In other words, it was written as a blanket statement against everyone who was out after 8 p.m. curfew. And therefore, it was not aimed at protesters. Now, you might make a claim that, in effect, the curfew was aimed at only protesters, but they haven't provided any evidence of that yet. That curfew remained in effect on August 25th, 2020. Defendants know armed individuals plan to patrol Kenosha and have threatened to harm the citizens. And that's the longest header I've ever seen. I would never write a header like that, but that's just me. That evening, armed individuals descended on Kenosha. They could be seen patrolling the streets in and around the demonstrations, brandishing weapons. Now, that is a statement of fact, but I don't believe it's true. I didn't see any brandishing of weapons that night, not on video. Threatening residents, I didn't see a whole lot of that either. And pointing weapons at peaceful demonstrators without provocation. The email and social media posts made clear that these volunteers would not be there to protect their own homes or businesses, and that they had not been hired by any local business to secure property. Gee, what a great place. I would put some actual quotes in there to verify. Instead, they intended to patrol the streets, acting as armed law enforcement officials. They're acting as security. Neither Defendant Meiskines nor Defendant Beth made any attempt to dissuade Mathewson or any other armed individuals from showing up in Kenosha to patrol the streets. Now, and this is actually maybe a good statement to make here. This is probably their strongest suit. Defendants Meiskines and Beth acknowledged that the KPD and KCSD were aware that pro-militia armed individuals intended to patrol and then did patrol downtown Kenosha. Okay, we come to a new header here. Rittenhouse shoots Anthony Huber and 2 others. Among the armed individuals who arrived in Kenosha on August 25th was Kyle Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse was a 17-year-old from Antioch, Illinois. By his appearance, Rittenhouse was obviously a minor. And I have no faith in that kind of comment. Okay, so here is Kyle Rittenhouse the night of the shooting, age 17, and here he is after the shooting, age 18. I mean, does something magical happen to you on your 18th birthday that makes you look so much older that now you go from obviously a minor to obviously not a minor? Face it, there was no way that the police officers that night could have told that Kyle Rittenhouse was obviously a minor. I'm going to skip over the weapon talk. Rittenhouse was brandishing his gun openly and conspicuously. Yeah, that's called open carry, and it's not brandishing. He was just openly carrying it. I saw no instances of Kyle Rittenhouse brandishing a gun that night. So he's brandishing his gun openly and conspicuously, strapping it over his shoulder using a tactical sling. Oh my gosh, he's using a tactical sling. He's so dangerous. Designed to position the rifle at the center of his chest for rapid elevation and positioning, as opposed to just carrying the rifle, which also allows you to rapidly elevate it and position it. The rifle was visible at all times across his body or in his hands. Yeah, it's called open carry. How else are you going to carry an AR-15 rifle? Are you going to stuff it up your shirt? Rittenhouse was in clear violation of the law, which prohibits a minor from possessing or displaying such a gun. No, it's not a clear violation of the law. They're still deciding this. And in fact, I think it's about a 50-50 proposition as to whether they will call his carrying of the rifle legal or not. Numerous KPD and KCSD officers saw Rittenhouse before and after the shootings that night. Despite being in clear violation of Wisconsin law, which it was not, it's still to be determined. Rittenhouse was not asked for identification, was not questioned, was never detained, and was not disarmed. The police had no probable cause for doing any of those things. They didn't even have reasonably articulated suspicion. Kyle was not obviously a minor. He was 4 months away from his 18th birthday. How obvious could his youth have been? It's not even clear that even if the officers knew he was 17, that they could still do anything, because guess what? The law very well may allow 17-year-olds to carry a rifle in the open. That has yet to be determined. So it was not a clear violation of the law at all. We've gone over that a lot. So the police officers could not ask for identification. Well, they could ask, but he doesn't have to provide it. And they certainly could not detain or disarm him. Instead, defendants allowed Rittenhouse to patrol the streets of downtown Kenosha with his deadly assault rifle. Ooh, so deadly. That we have to put that in there, because an assault rifle, well, whether it's deadly or not is in question. So I'm glad they put that in there. They invited him in, deputized him. When did they ever deputize Kyle Rittenhouse? Can somebody explain that to me? When was Kyle Rittenhouse deputized? Conspired with him? What? Okay, you might be able to make a claim that Ryan Balch conspired with law enforcement with that whole deal about the law enforcement pushing the protesters down into the area. But when did Kyle Rittenhouse ever conspire with them? Has that claim ever been made by anybody? As far as ratifying his actions, okay, I guess you can make that kind of statement. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it at least. As a result of defendants' actions, within the zone defendants controlled, Rittenhouse shot at 4 Kenosha area residents, killing 2 of them and seriously injuring a third. Why they have to be Kenosha area, I don't know. And in fact, Gage Grosskreutz was not from Kenosha. At around 11 p.m., without provocation, okay, that's a pretty interesting claim, Rittenhouse pointed his gun at an unarmed demonstrator heading to his car to go home. Oh, he's going to rely on Jeremiah's testimony? Oh, that's a real hot one. I already did a video on this. Jeremiah is a witness who claimed that Kyle Rittenhouse threatened him with his rifle. Unfortunately for Jeremiah, his story does not hold up under scrutiny. In fact, it's pretty obvious from his statements that he did not know what really happened that night, and he made up a whole bunch of stuff under the presumption that Kyle was the main aggressor against Joseph Rosenbaum. The facts don't bear that out, and it's pretty clear that Jeremiah, although he claimed he saw what happened there between Joseph Rosenbaum and Kyle Rittenhouse, he never saw it at all. And by the way, this is not Captain Yellow Pants, I don't believe. I think he's talking about Jeremiah. Around 11:45 p.m., Rittenhouse shot Joseph Rosenbaum in the parking lot of an auto dealership. Rosenbaum was killed. Instead of seeking medical attention or any other form of aid, Rittenhouse called his friend Dominic Black, told Black that he had just killed someone, and then ran. Who are we suing here? Are we suing Kyle Rittenhouse? If I recall, this lawsuit is aimed at the Kenosha County and the city of Kenosha and the police officers and all that. So why are we making hay out of the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't call 911? Rittenhouse ran from the scene of the Rosenbaum shooting with his assault rifle in his hands, holding it in a ready position. You're running with a rifle in a sling. Try running and not having it in the ready position. He has to hold the rifle from keeping it from flopping around as he's running. And so, yeah, he's going to hold it like that. But again, who's being sued here? Is it the city and the county, or is it Kyle? People were yelling that Rittenhouse had just shot someone. Rittenhouse stumbled and fell to the ground, and several citizens approached him in an attempt to disarm him. Oh, boy. They approached him. They were chasing him. And one of them tried to curb stomp him. Another one hit him with a skateboard. That's not just approaching. Anthony Huber was one of those dumbasses. Individuals. Anthony approached Rittenhouse to disarm him, stop the shooting, and save the lives of others. Anthony Huber was a hero. You can almost see John Huber being so satisfied with seeing that one highlighted on its own line for emphasis. As Anthony was reaching for Rittenhouse's rifle to pull it away, Rittenhouse shot him in the chest, colon. Here is the photo I would not want to put in a lawsuit against the city. The shooter is on the ground, on his back, and Anthony Huber is on top of him. This just does not look good. And going back, I have never seen a colon used like that to introduce an actual photo. Oh, this gets rich. After Anthony was shot, Gage Grosskreutz, you misspelled his first name, by the way, approached Rittenhouse with his hands up, pleading with him to stop his shooting rampage. Oh, I could just hear it now. Please, Mr. Gunman, stop your shooting rampage. Okay. Rittenhouse shot at Grosskreutz from point-blank range, hitting him in the arm. Thankfully, Grosskreutz survived. Oh, man. But the shot that Rittenhouse fired at Anthony's chest was fatal. Oh, I love the way they put this at the very end for dramatic effect. Wow. Defendants authorized Rittenhouse's shootings. Defendants did nothing to stop Rittenhouse's illegal conduct. I'm not sure they could have. They did not arrest him for illegally carrying a gun. They could not have done that. They had no probable cause to even suspect he was doing anything. They did not disarm him. Can't do that. They did not limit his movement in any way. They couldn't do that. They did not question him. Can't do that either. They did not stop him from shooting individuals after he started. Now, how in the hell are they going to do that? Let's see here. Joseph Rosenbaum is chasing Kyle, and JoJo catches up to Kyle, and Kyle turns to shoot him, and the police were going to do what at that moment? Were they going to throw themselves in the line of fire and catch the bullet? They did not arrest him. detain him, or question him even after he had killed 2 people. Okay, they have a little bit of a complaint here. I can see them making this complaint. And I think there are reasons why they did not arrest him, detain him, or question him. But at least if I'm on the jury, this is something that would matter to me. The rest of this is garbage. Instead, defendants deputized Rittenhouse and other armed individuals, conspired with them, and ratified their actions by allowing them to patrol the streets armed illegally with deadly weapons and shoot and kill innocent citizens. Yeah, we've gone over that many times. Among other things, defendants directed their curfew order only at people protesting defendants' own police violence, and not at Rittenhouse and others who were supporters of law enforcement. Yeah, that's probably because they were supporters of law enforcement. The people that the cops were trying to enforce the curfew against were people that were throwing stuff at them and were damaging property and things like that. Those who were not doing that, and in fact were trying to stop those people from doing those kind of things, probably didn't receive the same treatment from police because they were acting better. You know, that's kind of how the police work. That's how they operate. Bad people who do bad things, the police actually go out and try to do something about it. But if you're a good person doing good things and you're not breaking the law, you're not breaking stuff, the police leave you alone. That's how it goes. Rittenhouse and others were subject to a different set of rules and were allowed to move about freely in areas controlled by defendants. Yes, because they weren't breaking the law. They weren't hurting people. They weren't tearing things apart. They weren't burning stuff and throwing things at the police. So they were treated differently by the police because of that. That is correct. If you go and you speed down the freeway, you're more likely to get mistreated by the police than if you follow the speed limit. For example, at 9:57 p.m., a Kenosha police sergeant sent a message to all officers through the department's internal messaging system, noting the presence of armed individuals patrolling the streets in violation of the curfew order. Rather than take any steps to detain, dissuade, or disarm these armed individuals, which they could not do because open carry is legal in Wisconsin, a KPD sergeant made clear that they were not to be detained, dissuaded, or disarmed, probably because they weren't breaking any laws, calling the armed individuals in blatant violation of the curfew order very friendly. That's right, they are protecting the community. They're trying to stop people from burning and hurting, those kind of things. So yeah, they're very friendly. Likewise, at 11:26 p.m., callers reported that members of the armed individuals had slashed tires in the nearby area. But the defendants did nothing in response to this conduct, let alone arrest the perpetrators. First, how do you know that these were part of these patriots or armed individuals that slashed the tires? Also, the fact that they didn't arrest the perpetrators was likely because they didn't know who they were. It's not the first time that somebody has committed a crime and not been arrested. Instead, at approximately 11:30 p.m., about 15 minutes before Rittenhouse shot Rosenbaum, Huber, and Grosskreutz, KPD and KCSD officers were talking to Rittenhouse and the other armed individuals who had congregated in the parking lot of a private business. Oh my heavens, they were talking to them. Oh, we can't have that. Something must be done. Despite the fact that the armed individuals were in violation of the curfew order, the officers and deputies communicated their full support and appreciation for Rittenhouse and others, and that's a real stretch. Full support. As far as I know, we have one police officer saying thank you. That's pretty much it. In video footage taken at the scene, officers can even be heard asking armed individuals if they needed water. Rittenhouse can be seen telling the officers that they did need water, which officers gave them. And I don't know why everybody makes a big deal out of that water. Who cares? Rittenhouse and his buddies got gassed. They have that stuff in their eyes. They need water to flush it out. So they asked the officers, do you have any water? And the officers gave them some. So what? Rittenhouse walked right up to the police vehicles. Despite his obviously tender age, oh, good Lord, tender age? All right. Despite his obviously tender age, he was not asked for identification to demonstrate that he could lawfully possess an assault rifle, and because they had no probable cause for doing so. They didn't even have reasonably articulated suspicion. He's almost 18 years old. There was no reason to think that he was a minor. The officers not only provided armed individuals with water, voiced their support and appreciation for the actions of Rittenhouse and others, saying, "We appreciate you guys, we really do, and as far as I know, that was only one officer." Needless to say, KPD and KCSD officers did not offer assistance or appreciation to any protesters. What? Why would they offer appreciation to the protesters? The ones that were throwing stuff at them? Yelling at them? Blaming them for all those shootings, and they're supposed to appreciate them? At the same time, the officers were handing out assistance and praise to the armed individuals, including Rittenhouse. They can be heard over loudspeakers in their armored vehicles ordering the protesters to disperse. "This is the last warning. You will disperse," and "This area is closed. You are trespassing. Leave now." No such warnings or threats were made to the armed individuals, probably because they weren't tearing stuff apart. The KPD and KCSD officers deliberately orchestrated these circumstances. Now, that's a pretty strong claim. A clear message was sent that perceived protesters were required to disperse, while armed individuals who supported law enforcement could roam free and assist the officers. These events directly led to Anthony Huber's death. No, they did not. They indirectly led to his death. And quite frankly, I don't even see that much of a connection there. Is it not true that if the protesters had obeyed the police officers, that Anthony Huber would still be alive? They are admitting that KPD and KCSD officers told the protesters to go away. So how could these events have led directly to Anthony Huber's death? What led to Anthony Huber's death was that the protesters did not obey officers' commands. Now keep in mind, you might be saying, well, they shouldn't have to, but this is a lawsuit against the county and the city. They're claiming that the county and the city are to blame for what happened to Anthony Huber. Before the fatal shootings, one of the armed individuals was interviewed. He said the following: "You know what the cops told us today? They were like, we're going to push him down by you because you can deal with him and then we're going to leave." I think they're talking about Ryan Balch. And if they are, why don't they name him here? For the record, it's just Ryan Balch's claim. And that is exactly what happened. Defendants ordered the protesters to move south, funneling them into a confined area. I'm not sure they were funneled, where they were met by the violence perpetrated by Rittenhouse and other armed individuals. And that is a completely unfair characterization of what happened. Remember, the protesters were pushed past the area of Kyle Rittenhouse. They were pushed past the car source. Kyle and Ryan took it upon themselves to grab their medical kits and walk into the protest area. So the notion that the defendants pushed the protesters into an area for them to be attacked is absolutely ridiculous. It's asinine. Also, it says that defendants Rittenhouse and others arrived at a plan to collectively use force and state authority against the protesters. What plan are we talking about here? I'm not aware of any plan. Keep in mind, they're saying that the city and the county and Rittenhouse and all these armed individuals together planned something here. I see no evidence of that. I think it's ludicrous. Even if you believe that Ryan Balch might have conspired with the police in some way. Rittenhouse was not a part of that. For example, Rittenhouse's own lawyers have stated, by the way, Rittenhouse's own lawyers are not witnesses. So who cares what they say? Rittenhouse's own lawyers have stated that the police maneuvered a mass of individuals down the street towards the auto shops, where the armed individuals had gathered. But that doesn't mean that there was a plan for this in place. And it certainly doesn't imply that Rittenhouse was involved in this plot. As a result, defendants invited, deputized, authorized, conspired with, and ratified the actions of Rittenhouse, a boy illegally in possession of an assault rifle who roamed the street in violation of an emergency curfew order, shooting innocent civilians, killing 2, seriously injuring a 3rd, and narrowly missing a 4th. Kind of an odd place for a summary, but okay. Let's go over this. Was he invited? I don't recall the county or the city inviting Rittenhouse anywhere. Did they deputize him? No, absolutely not. Did they authorize any of his actions? No, I don't see any evidence of that either. Did they conspire with Kyle? There is no evidence of that. Did they ratify his actions? Maybe. I mean, you might be able to make such a claim. Also, a boy illegally in possession of an assault rifle, that has not yet been determined, who roamed the street in violation of an emergency curfew order. Yeah, guess who else roamed the street in violation of an emergency curfew order? Anthony Huber. You don't see any complaints about that here. To make matters worse, when Huber and Grosskreutz were shot, okay, so here they're going to complain about the fact that Kyle was not arrested after the shootings. I'm going to go ahead and skip. I don't have any issues with anything here. And at this point, it starts to become a little sick. The only reason defendants allowed Rittenhouse to walk away after shooting 3 people was because he was white, and because he was affiliated with the armed individuals who had defendants' explicit support. How do you know this? Did you ask any of the officers why they allowed him to walk away? The race card. Long after he had left the scene and the state, and how long? We're not talking a really long time. I think he turned himself in like 1 a.m. So it was pretty short after the shootings there. And I really don't like this long after. Anyways, give us a specific time. How many minutes? How many hours? Rittenhouse was finally arrested and charged with murder and other crimes by the Kenosha County District Attorney's Office. Yeah, we're kind of glossing over the fact that the reason why it took a while for the Kenosha County District Attorney's Office to arrest him was because Rittenhouse turned himself into an Illinois police department. So how are you going to blame the County District Attorney's Office for that? By inviting, deputizing, conspiring with, and ratifying the actions of armed individuals who were empowered to patrol the streets of Kenosha, defendants created an extremely and obviously dangerous and deadly environment, which led directly and foreseeably to the shootings of Anthony Huber and others. If it was so foreseeable, then why did Anthony Huber attack Kyle Rittenhouse? I mean, if it's that foreseeable, why would you do that? That's suicide at that point. And I also take umbrage with the whole led directly. No, it led indirectly. Defendants' open support of and coordination with the armed individuals in the minutes and hours before the shootings deprived Anthony Huber and the other protesters of the basic protections typically provided by police. They ordered Anthony Huber to leave. They ordered him to go home. He didn't do it. The whole point of the curfew order was to protect people. It was a license for the armed individuals to wreak havoc and inflict injury on people who are violating the curfew order. Again, you have to remember this is a civil suit against the defendants, who are in this case the county and the city. And it's the city that put together a curfew order to protect people. The whole idea was that you put a curfew in place, people have to go home, and therefore they are not injured. Anthony Huber disobeyed the curfew order. Rittenhouse's own lawyers, who cares? They're not witnesses to the scene. Rittenhouse's own lawyers have blamed the shootings on defendants, highlighting defendants' abject failure to ensure basic law and order to citizens. Defendants have continued their disparate treatment of Black people even after the deaths of Huber and Rosenbaum. For example, defendant Miskinez has refused to publicly condemn the crimes of Rittenhouse. Gee, I wonder why. Possibly because it's not known at this point whether he committed any crimes. He has not been convicted of anything yet. Why would you publicly condemn his crimes, per se? That would only paint you as a biased investigator. Remember, it's the county and the city that are going to do the investigation of the shootings. And if you go in there and you publicly condemn them, at that point you become fodder for the defense. They put you up on the stand and they will ask you, did you come to any kind of objective conclusions before the investigation? And you would have to say, yes, we considered the defendant guilty. And could that color the investigation? Of course. You're supposed to be unbiased. Indeed, he has defended the armed individuals as citizens exercising their constitutional rights, which they probably were. The protesters received the opposite treatment from defendant Miskinez. Moreover, in his first press conference after the shooting, defendant Miskinez refused to make any statements condemning or even dissuading the armed individuals, even when he was specifically asked if he wanted armed vigilante groups to be present again the next night of protests. And I would love to see the context of the question. What was asked of him? What did he actually say? That's important to me. Racial discrimination and viewpoint discrimination. I don't think I've ever heard of viewpoint discrimination. Just going to get interesting. What a way to open up this section. If Kyle Rittenhouse were Black, defendants would have acted much differently. And how do you know that? Huh? That's a pretty wild claim. And by the way, I think it's was Black. Little verbiage-subject agreement problem. If a Black person had approached police with an assault rifle, offering to patrol the streets with the police, he most likely would have been shot dead. Well, where are you getting that? Based on what? Likely? Really? If a Black child had shot 3 citizens with an assault rifle and was seen walking away from the scene of the shooting with the assault rifle in hand, while other citizens yelled he was an active shooter, he would have been shot dead. I feel like I'm reading Twitter. This is the kind of crap that people post in YouTube comments. And usually you don't want to put that kind of stuff in lawsuits because these people are nuts. They're insane. I can't believe I'm reading this in an actual lawsuit. Claims that are completely unsubstantiated. We don't know if Kyle was Black what the police would have done. Do we even know that the police thought that Kyle had shot anybody? In none of these circumstances would defendants have permitted the individual to roam the streets, illegally and heavily armed, shoot civilians, and then walk past a dozen officers, talk to them, and simply go home. They have spent the entire legal document claiming that's exactly what the defendants did. And now they're saying they would not have. Perhaps they're saying they would not have if Kyle was Black, but that's not mentioned anywhere in here. I kind of feel like John Huber wrote this. One need not look any further than the very event that gave rise to the protest at which Anthony Huber was killed. Although Jacob Blake was not at the site of a shooting, possessed no gun, brandished no weapon, oh, good grief, had not shot or hurt anyone, and was climbing into his own car with 2 children, Blake was shot in the back 7 times by officers employed by defendant KPD. Oh, let's count the errors in just this one paragraph. It's true, Jacob Blake was not at the site of a shooting. Do you have to be? He didn't possess a gun, but he certainly had a knife. He admitted so. And we have him on camera carrying the knife into the car. The knife is out in the open. Had not shot or hurt anyone. Well, he did get in an assault with police officers. Maybe they weren't injured as a result of it, but he tried to. And was climbing into his own car. No, it wasn't his own car. He was stealing the car for all practical purposes. With 2 children. No, there were 3. Blake was shot in the back 7 times by officers employed by defendant KPD. He was shot in the back by only 1 officer. How many times was he actually shot? His own attorney said 4 times, but a lot of news outlets say 7. I'll let you out there in viewer land answer that. By contrast, Rittenhouse was walking away from the scene of a double homicide with an assault rifle in his arms, and he was permitted to simply walk away. And you cannot compare these 2 situations. I cannot believe that these lawyers went to law school. You just cannot do this. This is ridiculous to say, well, Jacob Blake was shot and Kyle Rittenhouse was not. And then cherry pick differences between those 2 events to make her case. Yes, it is true, Jacob Blake was not at the site of a shooting, and that Kyle Rittenhouse was. But that doesn't mean that Kyle Rittenhouse should have been shot by the police and Jacob Blake spared. Because there are differences in these events that the lawyers have glossed over completely. Number 1, Jacob Blake was armed and was attempting to get into a car with children. Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't. Jacob Blake fought with the police. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't. Jacob Blake was tased. Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't. Jacob Blake had a felony warrant on his arrest. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't. So you see how you can cherry pick these differences to try to make a case, but no judge is going to fall for this crap. Jacob Blake is black. Kyle Rittenhouse is white. So if I'm a judge and I'm looking at 91, 92, and 93, I just hand the lawsuit back to the lawyers. And I would tell them, hey, you guys need to go back and revise this. This is ridiculous. Any kid can see through the logical fallacies you're employing here. Moreover, the demonstrators were a diverse group of citizens protesting police violence against black people, which included many black Americans and other people of color. I only shot white people that night, so why does it matter what the racial makeup of the rest of the group was? They were protesting, in part, the racial discrimination of defendants KPD and KCSD and their officers, as exemplified by the shooting of Jacob Blake. So essentially, the lawyers here are claiming that Jacob Blake was shot because he was black. Had nothing to do with the fact that he was armed. Had nothing to do with the fact that he was trying to get into a car filled with children. The armed individuals were all white, the race card, and they're playing it hard and heavy here. Similarly, the protesters were advocating a viewpoint critical of the police, including defendants KPD and KCSD. The armed individuals espoused a viewpoint that was avowedly pro-police. The difference in treatment of the 2 groups was stark. The white pro-police armed individuals were allowed by defendants to patrol the streets with weapons of war. Ooh, weapons of war. Like my 1911, that's a weapon of war. Participating in the police action and threatening and inflicting violence on innocent civilians. On innocent civilians? Proofread, come on. While the diverse group of protesters criticizing police actions were ordered to disperse because they were violating the curfew order. No such orders were given to the pro-police individuals who were in violation of the curfew as well, primarily because they weren't causing the trouble. The protesters were also treated differently than the armed individuals in terms of who was subject to arrest. In the days after the protests began, more than 150 protesters were arrested for allegedly violating the curfew order. Not a single one of the armed individuals was arrested by defendants for violating the same curfew order. selected the time frame here, because Kyle Rittenhouse is facing charges of violating the curfew. Many of the armed individuals with whom the defendant departments had allied themselves were avowed racist. That is a statement of fact that has no basis here and is irrelevant. Among the armed individuals present at the protest was Ryan Balch, a member of the Boogaloo Boys. Actually, he claims he's not, who could be seen patrolling the streets with Rittenhouse. The Boogaloo Boys are a right-wing militia group whose adherents include neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Were the people there that night neo-Nazis and white supremacists? That's what's important, not whether there are other members. But whatever. According to Balch, as many as 32 members of the Boogaloo Boys were in Kenosha patrolling the streets, and I don't recall him ever saying that. Part of the problem is that there are no citations in this lawsuit for anything. It's just one unsubstantiated claim after another. In the months after he killed Anthony Huber, Rittenhouse was seen in a bar in his hometown flashing an OK sign, a symbol of white supremacy, white power. Are we suing Kyle Rittenhouse, or are we suing the county here? Systemic racial discrimination in the Kenosha Police Department and Kenosha County Sheriff's Department. And, you know, if you're going to write a document like this, use a consistent style. Italics? No, you're supposed to be using unitalics boldface for this. And I'm not going to go through this. You can read it on your own. But basically, they have amassed some stories from various people about how evil the Kenosha Police Department is. I'm not here to stick up for them, so I really don't care about this stuff. And now they go through the various counts, and they basically rehash everything that they have already said. So there's a little point in going over this. You can read it again on your own if you like. I don't see anything in here that is eyebrow-raising that has not already been discussed. So here's the attorney that's responsible for this mess, Anand Swaminathan. I have no idea where he got his law degree, but he obviously did not take any courses in technical writing. And these attorneys are also a part of the deal. Their name's on this document. Therefore, they get to blame for the dumpster fire. John Levy, Elizabeth Wang, Anand, Steve Art, and David Owens. What do you think? Like my video, subscribe to my channel.